Sierra Vista, Arizona, 2018. Beneath the picturesque sunsets and quiet streets of this small desert town, a dark secret was brewing. What seemed like an idyllic community was about to be shaken to its core by a crime so chilling, so calculated, that even seasoned investigators struggled to piece it together. It wasn't just a murder, it was a betrayal, a tale of love twisted into obsession, and the unraveling of lives tethered by ambition, desire, and deception. Rachel Harrington stood as the epitome of success in Sierra Vista. Owner of the renowned Steel Fortress Gym, Rachel was a powerhouse, both literally and figuratively. Her gym was the pride of the town, attracting clients from all walks of life, drawn by her reputation for discipline and results. But Rachel wasn't just admired, she was feared. Her commanding presence and relentless pursuit of excellence made her a formidable figure. She thrived on control, and she had built her empire brick by brick, always ensuring that she held the reins in every aspect of her life. But beneath the polished exterior of the successful businesswoman lay a woman teetering on the edge, a wife whose carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Ethan Harrington was Rachel's husband of 10 years. Once a bright-eyed real estate agent with dreams of his own, Ethan had long since faded into the shadows of his wife's success. In public, he was the charming, supportive husband, the perfect complement to Rachel's larger-than-life persona. But at home, he felt trapped, diminished by her dominance, his own ambitions reduced to fleeting whispers drowned out by her booming voice. Ethan yearned for something softer, something kinder, something he hadn't felt in years. He found it in Sophia Morales. Sophia was everything Rachel wasn't. At 32, Sophia was warm, nurturing, and full of dreams. She worked as a receptionist at a local community clinic while studying to become a nurse, a path inspired by her mother, who had juggled part-time nursing to support their family. Raised in a modest household on the south side of Sierra Vista, Sophia had grown up knowing the value of hard work and resilience. Her life wasn't easy, but she met every challenge with a quiet determination. To those who knew her, Sophia was a beacon of kindness, always ready to lend a hand or offer a listening ear. To Ethan, she was a lifeline, a reprieve from the suffocating control he endured at home. What began as innocent conversations at the clinic evolved into something deeper. Ethan found solace in Sophia's compassion, and Sophia, though conflicted, couldn't resist the connection they shared. Their secret moments were fragile yet intoxicating, a refuge from the harsh realities of their lives. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and in Sierra Vista, rumors spread like wildfire. When Rachel began noticing Ethan's late nights and emotional distance, it didn't take long for her to uncover the truth. Her world, meticulously crafted and fiercely guarded, was threatened, not just by Ethan's betrayal, but by the quiet receptionist who had dared to step into her life. But Rachel wasn't the type to wallow in self-pity or shed tears over a broken heart. She was a woman of action, and in her mind, this wasn't just betrayal, it was war. The rage that simmered beneath her composed exterior was a force that would not be contained. And so, she began to plan. In Rachel's eyes, there was only one way to regain control: Sophia Morales had to be removed from the equation, permanently. In the days leading up to May 14, 2018, Sierra Vista carried on as usual, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath its tranquil surface. What unfolded next would leave the town reeling, its residents questioning how well they truly knew the people they called neighbors. Sophia Morales had always been a dreamer. Born and raised in the modest outskirts of Sierra Vista, Arizona, she knew what it meant to fight for every inch of progress. Her childhood home, a weathered single-story house, stood as a testament to her parents' relentless dedication. Her father, Carlos Morales, was a skilled mechanic, often coming home with grease-stained hands and a weary smile. Her mother, Elena Morales, worked part-time as a nurse, splitting her time between caring for patients and raising her 3 children. For Sophia, the youngest of the Morales family, life had always been a careful balance of struggle and hope. From a young age, Sophia was drawn to the nurturing profession of her mother. While other children played with toys, Sophia sat at the kitchen table, listening intently as her mother shared stories of her shifts at the local clinic. Elena spoke of long hours, tight budgets, and moments of exhaustion, but she also spoke of the joy that came from helping others. Those stories lit a fire in Sophia, and by the time she turned 10, she confidently announced to her family that she would one day become a nurse. It wasn't just a career aspiration, it was her way of giving back, of honoring the sacrifices her parents had made. But dreams don't pay bills, and the Morales family's finances left little room for luxuries like higher education. Sophia, ever practical and determined, knew she'd have to pave her own way. By the time she graduated high school, she had already juggled multiple part-time jobs, waitressing at a local diner, babysitting neighborhood kids, and even helping her father in his garage on weekends. These experiences shaped her into someone who understood the value of hard work and persistence. At 28, Sophia had finally managed to enroll part-time in a local nursing program, but balancing her studies with her job as a receptionist at the Sierra Vista Community Clinic wasn't easy. Every day, she split her time between coursework and managing the front desk at the clinic. Patients often commented on her welcoming smile and calm demeanor. She was the kind of person who could diffuse tension in a waiting room or comfort a nervous child with just a few kind words. For many, Sophia was more than just a receptionist, she was the heart of the clinic. Yet beneath her gentle exterior lay a quiet vulnerability. Sophia's life had been a series of compromises, dreams delayed, sacrifices made for others. Her personal relationships often took a back seat to her responsibilities. While she dreamed of one day having a family of her own, she found herself envying the stability she saw in others. The Morales household, as loving as it was, had its own challenges. Money was tight, and Sophia often felt the unspoken weight of her parents' expectations. They wanted her to succeed, to escape the cycle of struggle they had endured, and Sophia carried that pressure like a heavy cloak. It was this vulnerability that made her susceptible to the connection she found in Ethan Harrington. At first, their interactions were nothing out of the ordinary, casual exchanges at the clinic's front desk as he waited for his appointments. But there was something about the way Ethan looked at her, the way he seemed genuinely interested in her aspirations, that drew her in. He listened to her in a way few others did, offering words of encouragement when she doubted herself. His compliments felt sincere, his presence comforting. For a woman who had spent much of her life giving to others, Ethan's attention felt like a gift she hadn't realized she needed. Still, Sophia wasn't naive. She knew Ethan was married, and she told herself that their conversations were harmless. But as weeks turned into months, those conversations deepened, moving beyond small talk and into intimate confessions. Ethan spoke of his strained marriage, of feeling invisible in his own home. Sophia sympathized, her heart aching for him in a way that blurred the boundaries of professionalism. She knew it was dangerous, but she couldn't help herself. Ethan saw her, not just as a receptionist or a student struggling to make ends meet, but as a person with dreams and desires of her own. In Ethan, Sophia found a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it felt like to long for something more. But as their connection grew, so did her guilt. Sophia often stared at herself in the mirror, questioning the choices she was making. She tried to pull away, but Ethan's charm was magnetic, his presence addictive. It was a dance on the edge of a knife, and deep down, Sophia knew that one misstep could send her world spiraling out of control. For now, though, she allowed herself the fleeting comfort of their stolen moments, unaware that those moments would soon lead her down a path she could never return from. From the outside, Rachel and Ethan Harrington appeared to have it all. They were the quintessential power couple in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Rachel was the proud owner of Steel Fortress Gym, a local fitness empire that had become the gold standard in personal training and community wellness. Ethan, on the other hand, had carved out a modest career as a real estate agent, specializing in the charming desert properties that dotted the area. Together, they seemed unstoppable, a picture-perfect partnership of ambition and stability. But beneath the surface, their marriage was anything but harmonious. Rachel was a force of nature. Ambitious, driven, and fiercely independent, she had built Steel Fortress Gym from the ground up. Her relentless work ethic and unyielding determination had earned her both respect and fear. Clients admired her ability to push them to their limits, but Rachel's uncompromising attitude extended beyond the gym. She approached every aspect of her life with the same iron grip: her career, her finances, and, most notably, her marriage. In her mind, control equaled success, and Rachel had no intention of relinquishing it to anyone, not even her husband. Ethan had once been drawn to Rachel's confidence. When they first met over a decade ago, her fiery personality had been a beacon of inspiration for him. She made him feel alive, challenging him to step outside his comfort zone and strive for more. But as the years wore on, that same intensity became suffocating. Rachel's success eclipsed his own, and her constant need for perfection left little room for compromise. Ethan's real estate career, while respectable, paled in comparison to the empire Rachel had built. She often reminded him of this, intentionally or not, with subtle jabs about his earnings or his lack of drive. At home, Rachel was no different than she was at the gym, a perfectionist who demanded results. She micromanaged every detail of their household, from the color of their kitchen cabinets to the allocation of their savings. Ethan, who had once admired her decisiveness, now felt like a supporting actor in a show that revolved entirely around her. The love they had shared in the early years of their marriage had eroded, replaced by a cold, transactional partnership. Their conversations became surface level, revolving around bills, schedules, and logistics. Any deeper topics were met with Rachel's sharp, dismissive tone, leaving Ethan feeling increasingly invisible. Ethan's growing frustration was met with Rachel's obliviousness. To her, everything seemed fine, because she was in control. She failed to notice the quiet ways Ethan was pulling away, the way he lingered at the office after hours, the way he no longer initiated conversations, the way he avoided her touch. Rachel had always prided herself on her ability to read people, but she had a blind spot when it came to Ethan. She believed he was too mild-mannered, too dependent on her, to ever stray from their marriage. For Ethan, the tipping point came not in a dramatic argument but in the accumulation of 1,000 small slights. The way Rachel would dismiss his ideas about their future, the way she rolled her eyes when he spoke about his work, the way she made him feel like a burden rather than a partner. Over time, resentment began to simmer beneath his calm exterior. Ethan yearned for something softer, something kinder, a relationship where he could be seen, not overshadowed. That longing became the crack in the foundation of their marriage, one that widened with every passing day. By the time he met Sophia Morales, Ethan was already a man adrift. What began as innocent conversations at the clinic quickly became an escape. Sophia represented everything Rachel was not. She listened to him without judgment, validated his feelings, and treated him like he mattered. Ethan didn't intend to fall for her, but the connection was undeniable. For the first time in years, he felt alive, and that feeling was intoxicating. Rachel, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her marriage. She was too consumed by the demands of her gym and her constant need to prove herself. To Rachel, their life together was secure, unshakable. She had worked too hard to let it falter. But what she didn't realize was that control, no matter how tightly held, can never guarantee loyalty. Their marriage was a ticking time bomb, the tension mounting with every unspoken word, every unacknowledged feeling. And when the truth finally came to light, it wouldn't just shatter their relationship, it would set off a chain of events that would end in bloodshed and tragedy. It started innocently enough, a simple, fleeting interaction at the front desk of the Sierra Vista Community Clinic. Ethan Harrington had stepped in for a routine checkup, weary from another long day of work and strained conversations at home. Behind the desk sat Sophia Morales, her warm smile lighting up the otherwise sterile clinic. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her voice gentle and welcoming. That voice, those eyes, that kindness, Ethan didn't know it then, but this moment would alter the course of his life forever. At first, their conversations were polite and professional. Sophia would check him in, confirm his appointments, and occasionally engage in small talk about the weather or local happenings. Ethan found these moments refreshing, a brief reprieve from the suffocating tension of his home life. Sophia, for her part, appreciated Ethan's courteous demeanor. He wasn't like the other patients who rushed in and out, impatient and curt. He took the time to ask about her day, to genuinely listen. It was a small kindness, but in Sophia's world, it meant more than he could have known. Over time, those interactions grew longer, more personal. Ethan began sharing snippets of his life, how his job had grown monotonous, how his marriage to Rachel felt more like a business arrangement than a partnership. Sophia, though hesitant at first, found herself drawn to his honesty. She admired his vulnerability, a stark contrast to the hardened personas she often encountered. Ethan's words resonated with her, echoing her own feelings of being stuck in a life that didn't quite fit. As their conversations deepened, Sophia couldn't help but notice the subtle sadness in Ethan's eyes, the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. He never spoke ill of Rachel, but the pain in his voice was unmistakable when he described their estranged dynamic. "Sometimes I wonder," he confided one day, "if this is all there is. If this, emptiness is just what life becomes." Sophia had no answer, but her empathetic gaze spoke volumes. For Ethan, that gaze was everything. It was understanding. It was solace. It was hope. Sophia's own struggles made her particularly attuned to Ethan's pain. She had spent years juggling jobs, studies, and family responsibilities, often feeling invisible in the process. Her parents loved her, but their expectations were relentless. She was supposed to be the one to make it, to break free from the cycle of struggle that had defined their lives. Yet, in the quiet moments when she was alone, Sophia often wondered if she would ever truly find happiness. Ethan, with his calm demeanor and gentle words, became a beacon of connection in her otherwise tumultuous world. Their relationship took a significant turn one rainy afternoon in late 2016. Ethan, having lingered at the clinic long after his appointment, invited Sophia for coffee. It was an innocent offer, but it felt like crossing an invisible line. Sophia hesitated, her mind racing with reasons to say no. But something in Ethan's voice, a mix of desperation and longing, made her agree. They spent hours talking at a small cafe, the storm outside mirroring the swirl of emotions brewing between them. For the first time, Ethan felt truly seen, and Sophia felt truly valued. As the weeks turned into months, their connection deepened. Coffee dates turned into walks through Sierra Vista's quiet streets, stolen moments that felt like sanctuaries from the chaos of their lives. They avoided discussing the obvious, that Ethan was married, that their relationship was inching closer to something neither of them had intended. Yet, neither could deny the pull between them. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. They filled gaps in each other's lives that had long been neglected. But with every moment of joy came a pang of guilt, especially for Sophia. She often lay awake at night, questioning her choices. She knew Ethan's wife, Rachel, only by reputation, a strong, determined woman who had built an empire. Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was treading into dangerous territory. She tried to pull away, to create distance, but Ethan's words always pulled her back. "You're the only person who makes me feel alive," he whispered once, his voice thick with emotion. Those words haunted her, binding her to him in ways she couldn't explain. For Ethan, Sophia was more than an escape, she was a lifeline. In her presence, he felt free from the crushing expectations of his marriage. But as much as he longed for a new beginning, he couldn't bring himself to leave Rachel. The thought of confrontation terrified him, not just because of her fiery temperament, but because of the financial and social consequences. Rachel had built their life, and Ethan feared what might happen if he tore it apart. Their affair became a delicate dance, a balancing act that grew more precarious with each passing day. Sophia would glance over her shoulder every time she saw Rachel's SUV in town, her heart racing with fear of being caught. Ethan concocted increasingly elaborate excuses for his absences, but the cracks in his facade were beginning to show. Neither of them wanted to admit it, but the walls were closing in. Unbeknownst to them, Rachel's suspicions were already simmering beneath the surface. And when the truth finally came to light, the fragile world Ethan and Sophia had built would collapse, leaving devastation in its wake. For now, though, they clung to the illusion that their love could exist in the shadows, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their reach. Rachel Harrington prided herself on her ability to control every aspect of her life. From the spotless floors of Steel Fortress Gym to the carefully curated image she presented to Sierra Vista, Rachel was a woman who left nothing to chance. She thrived on discipline, precision, and predictability. But in recent months, something had changed. The rhythm of her perfectly ordered life had begun to falter, and the culprit was her husband, Ethan. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable shifts in his behavior. Ethan started coming home later than usual, blaming his busy real estate schedule. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, now rarely left his pocket. Conversations that had once been routine felt stilted, his answers vague and rehearsed. Rachel, preoccupied with the demands of her gym, dismissed these changes as the natural byproduct of their busy lives. But as the weeks wore on, the cracks in Ethan's facade became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just his absences that troubled Rachel, it was the growing emotional distance between them. Ethan, who had once engaged with her ambitious plans and shared ideas for their future, now seemed uninterested. He avoided her gaze at dinner, his responses mechanical and devoid of warmth. Rachel, never one to admit vulnerability, chalked it up to stress. But deep down, an insidious doubt began to creep into her mind. Something was wrong, and Rachel Harrington did not take kindly to the unknown. The turning point came during a casual conversation at the gym. A longtime client, one of Rachel's trusted confidants, mentioned seeing Ethan at the Sierra Vista Community Clinic more frequently than seemed necessary. "He's been there a lot lately," the woman said, her tone casual but tinged with curiosity. "I thought maybe he was working with someone on a deal." Rachel's heart skipped a beat, but she masked her reaction with a practiced smile. "I'll ask him about it," she replied coolly, her mind already racing. That night, Rachel waited for Ethan to come home, her thoughts a whirlwind of suspicion and denial. When he finally walked through the door, she studied him closely, the way he avoided her eyes, the way he fumbled with his briefcase as if it held secrets too heavy to share. "How was work?" she asked, her voice steady, almost detached. Ethan muttered a vague response, and for the first time, Rachel felt the full weight of his dishonesty. The man standing before her was no longer the husband she thought she knew. Rachel's instincts, honed by years of managing a business and reading people, told her that there was more to Ethan's behavior than mere stress. She began to investigate, starting with his calendar and emails. Ethan had always been careful, but not careful enough. A string of innocuous appointments at the community clinic caught her attention, each one coinciding with his late nights and distant demeanor. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but Rachel needed confirmation. Her next move was calculated. Over the next few days, she casually inquired about Ethan's schedule, noting the inconsistencies in his explanations. Then, one evening, she asked a friend, a client who worked near the clinic, to keep an eye out for anything unusual. It didn't take long for her to receive the call she'd been dreading. "I saw him," the friend said, her voice hesitant. "He was with someone, a woman. They seemed close." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow, but she refused to let it show. "Thank you," she said simply before hanging up. Her hands trembled as she placed her phone on the counter, her mind racing with questions. Who was this woman? What did she mean to Ethan? And most importantly, what was Rachel going to do about it? Rachel's investigation escalated. She reached out to another trusted ally, this time someone in her inner circle who had access to the clinic staff. It didn't take long to put a name to the face: Sophia Morales, the young receptionist Ethan had been spending so much time with. Rachel's initial reaction was a mixture of shock and disbelief. Sophia? The name meant nothing to her, but the reality of the betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about control that Rachel felt slipping through her fingers. But Rachel wasn't the type to react impulsively. Anger simmered beneath her calm exterior, but she knew better than to confront Ethan without a plan. She kept the information to herself, watching him carefully, analyzing his every move. Each time he smiled at her or kissed her on the cheek, she felt the weight of his lies pressing down on her chest. Rachel wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. And humiliation, for someone like Rachel Harrington, was intolerable. As days turned into weeks, Rachel's rage transformed into something colder, more calculated. Confronting Ethan was no longer enough. She needed to send a message, to reassert her dominance over the life she had built. In her mind, Sophia wasn't just a woman, she was a threat, an obstacle that needed to be removed. And Rachel had never been one to back down from a challenge. With each passing day, her plan began to take shape. Every detail, every contingency, was carefully considered. Rachel would not simply reclaim control, she would obliterate anyone who dared to take it from her. Sophia Morales would regret ever crossing her path, and Ethan? He would learn the consequences of betraying a woman like Rachel Harrington. Unbeknownst to Ethan and Sophia, Rachel was preparing for a confrontation that would change all their lives forever. And in her mind, there was no turning back. May 14, 2018, was a day like any other in Sierra Vista, hot, dry, with a clear sky that seemed to stretch endlessly over the desert landscape. But for Rachel Harrington, it was the day everything would change. The quiet, unassuming town was about to be thrust into chaos, and the carefully curated world she had built for herself was about to shatter. Rachel had spent the last few weeks preparing, plotting her next move. Her anger had cooled into something far more dangerous, a cold, calculating determination. She knew exactly what she needed to do to reclaim control of her life. The revelation of Ethan's affair with Sophia Morales had made Rachel feel powerless, humiliated, and betrayed. But Rachel Harrington did not stay powerless for long. After days of careful observation and a steady stream of confirmations from her sources, Rachel had learned all she needed to know. Sophia was a threat, not just to her marriage, but to everything she had worked for. The gym, her reputation, and her very sense of identity had been built on being in control. The idea of another woman taking that control from her had become intolerable. In Rachel's mind, this wasn't just about vengeance, it was about survival. She could no longer let Sophia or Ethan challenge the life she had created. Rachel's plan had been set into motion. She invited Sophia to the Steel Fortress gym, under the guise of offering a private fitness consultation. She knew Sophia would jump at the chance. Rachel's gym was an icon in Sierra Vista, and being offered a personal session with the owner was an opportunity Sophia would surely see as a favor. Rachel had been careful, keeping her emotions in check, crafting a perfect facade of professionalism and calm. As the evening approached, the gym was quieter than usual. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the rows of machines, and the air smelled of disinfectant and sweat, a far cry from the serene environment that had once been Rachel's sanctuary. She stood near the back of the gym, waiting for Sophia to arrive. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of strategy and emotion. Rachel had prepared for this moment for weeks, but now that it was finally here, her mind raced. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. Sophia arrived right on time, her bright eyes scanning the room with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. She was eager, unaware of the storm that was about to engulf her. "Thanks for inviting me," Sophia said, her voice soft and trusting. She was completely at ease, too at ease. Rachel greeted her with a practiced smile. "It's no trouble," she replied, her tone neutral. "I thought it might be helpful to work on a few things. We can do some light training, nothing too intense." As they walked toward the back room of the gym, Rachel couldn't help but feel a surge of anger at how easy it had been to lure Sophia into this trap. She had orchestrated every detail, from the private meeting to the secluded room at the back of the gym. It was a room Rachel had used for personal training sessions in the past, cold, sterile, and empty of any distractions. The perfect place to make her move. Once inside, the door clicked shut behind them, and the sound echoed in the silence. Rachel's calm demeanor remained in place, but beneath it, a tempest was brewing. She led Sophia to a corner of the room, where the gym's mirrors reflected their faces back at them. Rachel's eyes locked onto Sophia's, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of hesitation in her chest. But that hesitation quickly dissolved. "Rachel," Sophia began, her voice uncertain now, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What's going on? This isn't what we agreed on." Rachel didn't respond immediately. Instead, she slowly walked to the center of the room, letting the silence build between them. Her heart pounded, but she steeled herself. She couldn't let her emotions control her now. Rachel had spent years cultivating an image of invincibility, and tonight, she was determined to keep that image intact, even if it meant doing something she never thought she would. "You're the reason everything has fallen apart," Rachel said, her voice steady but cold. "You've taken what was mine. My husband. My life. I won't let you destroy everything I've built." Sophia stood frozen, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she stammered, taking a step back. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know what was going on between you two. Ethan told me things were bad, but—" "Don't lie," Rachel interrupted, her voice sharp. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew exactly who he was when you decided to sleep with him." The word stung, but Rachel couldn't stop herself. Her rage had reached a boiling point, and her control was slipping away. She moved toward Sophia, her steps deliberate and methodical. "You're nothing but a distraction. A weakness I can't afford to have in my life anymore." Before Sophia could respond, Rachel grabbed her by the throat, her fingers tightening like a vice. Sophia gasped, her hands instinctively reaching for Rachel's wrists, but it was too late. Rachel's strength, honed by years of intense training and ruthless determination, overpowered Sophia's feeble attempts to escape. The fight was brief, a struggle that lasted mere moments, before Sophia's body went limp in Rachel's hands. Rachel stood over her, breathing heavily, her mind still racing with a strange clarity. She had done it. She had taken back control. She quickly wrapped Sophia's lifeless body in a gym towel, lifting it with surprising ease. The act felt almost mechanical, as if she were moving through a carefully rehearsed routine. There was no time for remorse, no time for second thoughts. The gym, once a place of power and vitality, now felt like a tomb. Rachel moved swiftly, dragging Sophia's body out to her car, parked discreetly in the back lot. The parking lot was deserted, just as she had planned. There were no witnesses, no prying eyes. She drove to the outskirts of town, to a remote industrial complex on the edge of Sierra Vista. Under the cover of darkness, she dug a shallow grave with the precision of someone who had done this before, burying Sophia's body deep in the earth. The finality of it was undeniable. When she returned to the gym, Rachel felt nothing. No remorse, no regret. Just a strange sense of calm, as if the storm had passed and she was finally at peace. But unbeknownst to Rachel, the storm was far from over. And in the days to come, her carefully laid plans would begin to unravel, piece by piece, until the full extent of her crime was exposed. The quiet of Sierra Vista was shattered on the morning of May 16, 2018, when Sofia Morales' body was discovered in a shallow grave on the outskirts of town. The body, hidden among the scrubby desert brush near an old, abandoned industrial complex, was a grisly reminder that not all secrets stay buried. The discovery sent ripples of fear through the tight-knit community, and what had started as a missing persons case soon spiraled into a full-scale investigation. For Detective Emily Diaz, the case was immediately unsettling. She had lived in Sierra Vista long enough to know the faces of its residents, the rhythms of its daily life. This was not a town where violent crime was common. Yet, here she was, standing over a young woman's lifeless body, trying to piece together the puzzle of how a 32-year-old receptionist ended up murdered in such a brutal and callous manner. The lack of clear evidence at the crime scene only deepened her suspicions. The killer had been careful, too careful. Diaz's first priority was to retrace Sofia's steps, but finding anything concrete proved difficult. The young woman had no known enemies, and her life, from what friends and family could tell, had been unremarkable, at least on the surface. Sofia had worked diligently at the community clinic, helping patients with a warm smile and kind words. She had a few close friends, but no one had mentioned any signs of trouble in her personal life. Yet the question lingered in the air: why was she murdered? What had led to her untimely death? It didn't take long for the investigation to zero in on Ethan Harrington, the mild-mannered real estate agent with a reputation for being devoted to his wife, Rachel. The connection had been made when surveillance footage from the Sierra Vista Community Clinic surfaced. Ethan had been spotted there regularly over the past few months, visiting the clinic even more frequently than his appointments should have required. The footage, combined with a few anonymous tips, led investigators to a key detail: Ethan had been having an affair with Sofia. When Diaz confronted Ethan, his reaction was one of shock and confusion. He denied knowing anything about Sofia's death, but the guilt that was written all over his face told a different story. He admitted to the affair, though he quickly tried to downplay its significance, claiming that it was a mistake born out of a troubled marriage. "Rachel and we haven't been okay for a while," Ethan confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "But I never thought something like this would happen." Ethan's admissions added another layer of complexity to the investigation. It was clear that there was much more going on behind closed doors than anyone had anticipated. But the deeper Detective Diaz dug, the more she realized that this case wasn't just about a secret affair gone wrong, it was about a web of hidden motivations and a marriage that had been slowly disintegrating for years. As the investigation progressed, Diaz and her team began uncovering disturbing details about Rachel Harrington's behavior. Rachel, the seemingly perfect and untouchable owner of Steel Fortress Gym, was becoming more and more of a person of interest. Multiple sources from the local fitness community began to share information about Rachel's increasingly erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to Sofia's murder. People who had worked with her, trained under her, and even close friends had witnessed moments of intense anger and paranoia. It was clear to the detectives that Rachel was deeply affected by the discovery of her husband's infidelity, but there was something more lurking beneath the surface. A breakthrough came when Rachel's close friend, a former client, spoke out. Rachel was obsessed with keeping her life in order. Everything had to be perfect, and when things started to fall apart, when she found out about Ethan and Sofia, "I think it pushed her to the edge," the friend confided. "I remember her saying she'd do anything to fix it." Anything. With this new information in hand, Detective Diaz began to build a clearer picture of Rachel's possible involvement. Sofia's murder wasn't a random act of violence, it was personal, premeditated, and carried out with an intensity that suggested a deep emotional investment. Rachel's desire for control, combined with her ruthless need to eliminate any threat to her life and reputation, pointed directly to her as a prime suspect. But there was one major obstacle: there was no direct evidence linking Rachel to the crime. Rachel's cold, composed demeanor was exactly what had made her so successful in business, but it now worked against her. She was careful, calculated, and always in control, leaving little room for error. Yet the more Rachel tried to maintain that control, the more obvious it became that she was hiding something. Detectives soon learned that Rachel had lured Sophia to the gym under the pretense of a personal training session, just days before Sophia's disappearance. Surveillance footage from the gym's security cameras confirmed that Sophia had arrived but never left. The footage was damning, and the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. As Detective Diaz approached Rachel with the evidence, the tension in the room was palpable. Rachel, however, remained unfazed, her posture unyielding. She had always prided herself on being in control, and she would not be easily broken. But the mounting evidence, combined with Ethan's confession about the affair, was enough to tip the scales. The investigation was no longer just about solving a murder, it had uncovered the darker side of a carefully constructed life. The Harringtons' perfect marriage was a facade, and Rachel's desperate attempts to keep her empire intact had driven her to take drastic, irreversible actions. But as the truth began to unfold, one question lingered in the air: how far would Rachel go to protect everything she had built, and who would ultimately pay the price for it? What the investigators didn't yet realize was that this case wasn't just about a woman scorned. It was about a family's darkest secrets, the hidden depths of a wife's obsession, and the tragic consequences of losing control. And the answers were only just beginning to surface. The trial of Rachel Harrington began in the summer of 2019, and it quickly became the talk of Sierra Vista. What had started as a quiet, small-town tragedy soon spiraled into a media frenzy, with reporters and spectators flooding the courthouse, eager to witness the fall of one of the town's most revered figures. The once powerful and untouchable gym owner now sat in the defendant's chair, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. Rachel's defense team was skilled, but they were up against a mountain of evidence that seemed insurmountable. They tried to paint Rachel as a woman pushed to the edge by betrayal, a victim of emotional distress who had lost control in the heat of the moment. Her lawyers argued that the murder of Sophia Morales was not premeditated, but a crime of passion, triggered by the discovery of her husband's affair. They tried to humanize Rachel, portraying her as a woman caught in a web of lies, struggling to hold on to her marriage and her life's work. But the prosecution's case was far stronger. Detective Emily Diaz, who had spent months meticulously investigating the crime, took the stand as one of the key witnesses. She laid out the timeline of events, detailing Rachel's obsessive behavior leading up to Sophia's death. Surveillance footage from Steel Fortress Gym showed Sophia arriving for a meeting with Rachel but never leaving the premises. Forensic evidence from the crime scene confirmed that Sophia's body had been disposed of swiftly and deliberately, buried in a remote industrial area where Rachel had driven, alone, in the middle of the night. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was Rachel's own statement to investigators. Although she had never directly confessed to the murder, she had said something telling in her initial questioning: "I had to fix it. I had to make it stop." The implication was clear. To Rachel, Sophia was not just a woman her husband had cheated with, she was an obstacle, a threat that needed to be eradicated to restore the balance of her life. That was all the jury needed to hear. The turning point in the trial came when Ethan Harrington, the man at the heart of the affair, took the stand. His testimony was raw and emotional, a man broken by guilt and grief. He admitted to his infidelity with Sophia and spoke of his deteriorating marriage with Rachel. "I didn't love her anymore," Ethan said, his voice cracking as he looked at Rachel for the first time in months. "But I never wanted it to come to this. I never thought it would lead to her death." Ethan's admission added a layer of tragedy to the case. His affair had not only destroyed his marriage but had also triggered a chain of events that would lead to the loss of a life. As he spoke, his eyes met Rachel's, and the look between them spoke volumes: guilt, regret, and a deep understanding of the consequences of his actions. Rachel remained stone-faced during most of the trial, her usual composure intact. But as Ethan spoke, something in her seemed to crack. There was no remorse in her eyes, but there was a shift, a realization that, despite everything, she was going to lose the one thing that had always mattered to her: control. The carefully curated life she had fought so hard to build was slipping through her fingers, and no amount of legal maneuvering could change that. In the closing arguments, the prosecution painted a chilling picture of a woman who had methodically planned her crime, driven by jealousy, pride, and a desperate need to maintain her empire. Rachel Harrington didn't just kill Sophia Morales, the prosecutor said, she killed the very thing that threatened her sense of power, the illusion of control that she had so carefully crafted. The defense, however, argued that Rachel had acted out of overwhelming emotional distress, claiming that she had lost control in a moment of rage. This was not a woman who planned murder, her lawyer argued. This was a woman who snapped in the face of unimaginable betrayal. After days of deliberation, the jury finally returned with a verdict. The courtroom was packed with onlookers, the air thick with anticipation. As the judge read the verdict, the room fell silent. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Rachel Harrington, guilty of first-degree murder." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. Her face remained unreadable as the reality of her situation set in. The years of manipulation, control, and power had come to an end. She was no longer the revered businesswoman who had built an empire, she was a convicted murderer. In the months following the trial, Rachel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her once thriving gym, Steel Fortress, was sold off to pay for legal fees, and her reputation, once a symbol of success and strength, was tarnished forever. The community of Sierra Vista, stunned by the trial's outcome, slowly began to rebuild, but the scars of the case would last long after the courtroom drama had ended. As for Ethan, the weight of his own guilt was too much to bear. He left Sierra Vista shortly after the trial, unable to face the town that had once admired him. He knew he wasn't directly responsible for Sophia's death, but he couldn't escape the truth that his actions had set everything in motion. The story of Rachel Harrington, once a woman at the pinnacle of power, had become one of the most talked about tragedies in Sierra Vista. The town would never forget the woman who had everything, only to lose it all in a moment of blind rage. In the end, the case wasn't just about murder. It was about the dangers of control, the toxic nature of secrets, and the devastating consequences of letting pride and jealousy dictate one's choices. And for Rachel Harrington, the cost of that lesson was far too high to ever be undone. The trial of Rachel Harrington, her conviction, and the aftermath left an indelible mark on Sierra Vista. The once celebrated woman, who had built an empire on strength, control, and perfection, had fallen from grace. Her carefully crafted life, centered around her gym, her marriage, and her image of invincibility, had crumbled under the weight of her actions. In the end, Rachel's desperate need for control, her obsession with maintaining the upper hand in all things, had led her down a path of destruction, one that cost an innocent life and shattered her own. But as the dust settled and the trial became part of Sierra Vista's dark history, the story left behind valuable lessons that resonate far beyond the walls of the courthouse. This tragedy wasn't just about the betrayal between a husband and wife, nor was it only about the fatal consequences of an affair. At its core, this was a story about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the fragility of power, and the destructive force of pride and jealousy. Rachel had built her life around control. She wanted to control her marriage, her business, and even the people around her. She believed that if she held everything tightly enough, nothing could slip through her fingers. But in her obsessive need for dominance, Rachel ignored one crucial truth: control, when taken too far, becomes a prison. It isolates you, blinds you to the realities around you, and leaves you incapable of seeing the damage you're causing until it's too late. The affair between Ethan and Sophia had been the spark that ignited the fire. Yet, Rachel's reaction wasn't driven solely by the betrayal, it was the loss of control that truly shattered her. Ethan had become someone she couldn't command, and Sophia represented a threat to her sense of power and self-worth. What Rachel failed to see in her blind rage was that love cannot be controlled, and relationships built on manipulation and domination are doomed to fail. Her marriage with Ethan was already on the brink of collapse long before Sophia entered the picture. Rachel's need to keep everything, and everyone, under her thumb only pushed Ethan further away, making him more susceptible to the very affair that would unravel their lives. In the end, Rachel's actions led to the death of Sophia, the destruction of her marriage, the loss of her business, and her imprisonment. Her obsession with control turned her into a woman who could no longer recognize the value of empathy, forgiveness, or even personal accountability. She thought she could preserve everything by eliminating the threats in her life, but she only succeeded in losing everything. The irony of it all was stark. In trying to maintain control, Rachel lost the one thing she needed most, her humanity. This story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession. We all have desires, ambitions, and things we wish to protect. But when we let those desires consume us, when we cling too tightly to the illusion of control, we risk destroying the very things we hold dear. Rachel Harrington's life was a reminder that when we allow our egos to dictate our actions, the consequences can be devastating, not just for us, but for those around us. But there's a deeper message here as well. Forgiveness and compassion are the antidotes to pride, jealousy, and control. In a world where we often feel the need to compete, to dominate, and to prove our worth, we sometimes forget that true strength lies not in overpowering others, but in embracing vulnerability, acknowledging our mistakes, and learning to forgive, not only others, but ourselves as well. This story also raises important questions about trust and communication in relationships. Ethan's affair with Sophia wasn't the root of the problem, it was simply the manifestation of deeper issues between him and Rachel. Their inability to communicate openly, to be vulnerable with each other, and to confront their problems together led them down a destructive path. Relationships, whether romantic, familial, or even professional, thrive on trust and open communication. When we fail to nurture these fundamental pillars, we risk the slow disintegration of everything we've built. In the end, the story of Rachel Harrington is a tragedy, but it's also an opportunity to reflect on our own lives. Are we holding on too tightly to things we cannot control? Are we allowing jealousy, insecurity, or pride to dictate our actions? Are we ignoring the signs of something broken, hoping it will fix itself without confronting the truth? These are the questions we must ask ourselves if we are to avoid repeating the same mistakes. What do you think of this story? Did Rachel's obsession with control and pride ultimately destroy her life? Do you believe that if she had communicated better with Ethan, things could have turned out differently? What lesson do you take from this tragic tale of betrayal and revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on the impact of jealousy, control, and communication in relationships.